The first sensation was cold. Not the biting cold of space, but something clinical and sterile that seemed to seep through his skin. Commander Jace Carter's eyes fluttered open to reveal a ceiling of seamless white material that curved gently, overhead pulsing with a soft rhythmic glow that matched his heartbeat. Where the hell am I? Memory crashed back in fragments. The diplomatic shuttle spinning out of control, the alien moon's surface rushing up to meet them, the screech of metal against stone. His hand instinctively moved to his chest, expecting to find injuries, but encountered only smooth, unmarked skin beneath a thin medical gown. You are awake. This is good. The voice was melodic, carrying an accent that made familiar words sound exotic. Jace turned his head, muscles protesting the movement, and felt his breath catch. Standing beside what he now realized was some kind of medical bed was a woman unlike any he'd ever seen. Her skin was a deep cerulean blue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and her hair fell in waves of deep crimson around her shoulders. But it was her eyes that truly captured him, large, almond-shaped, and filled with a bioluminescence that shifted between silver and gold as she moved. I am Kythera, she said, approaching with fluid grace. I am your assigned medical supervisor aboard the Zalari vessel Harmonious Deep. You have been unconscious for approximately 37 of your Earth hours. Jace struggled to sit up, his training kicking in despite his disorientation. My crew are safe, Kythera interrupted, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm and seemed to send a strange tingling sensation through his skin. Your pilot sustained minor injuries. Your diplomatic attaché was unharmed. Both have been treated and are currently in recovery. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by suspicion. And me? What's my condition? Kythera's luminous eyes studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Your injuries were significant. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, neural trauma. Our medical technology has repaired the physical damage, but there are complications. What kind of complications? She moved to a console beside his bed, her fingers dancing over surfaces that lit up at her touch. The integration of Zalari, biotechnology with human physiology, is not fully understood. We have repaired your body using our methods, but we must ensure compatibility. There could be unexpected interactions. The way she said those last words sent a chill down his spine. Interactions? Nothing dangerous, she assured him quickly, though something in her expression suggested the topic was more complex than she was letting on. However, protocol requires a full medical evaluation to ensure the success of the treatment. This must be conducted before you can be cleared for return to your people. Jace swung his legs over the side of the bed, testing his strength. He felt remarkably good. Better than he had in years, actually. His chronic back pain from an old training injury was completely gone, and he felt energized in a way that seemed almost unnatural. How long will this evaluation take? Kythera's eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite identify. That depends on many factors. Zalari medical practices are thorough. We believe in understanding our patients completely, not just their physical condition, but their emotional and psychological state as well. The integration of our biotechnology affects the whole being, not merely the body. There was something in her tone, a subtle emphasis on certain words, that made Jace look at her more closely. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was an intensity to her gaze that went beyond professional medical interest. When she looked at him, it felt almost predatory, not threatening, but like she was studying him in a way that had nothing to do with medicine. When do we start? He asked. Kythera's lips curved in what might have been a smile, though on her alien features it was difficult to tell. We have already begun, Commander Carter. Every moment you are here, I am learning about human physiology, human responses, human nature. The way she said nature made something stir in his chest. Part anticipation, part apprehension. Rest now, she continued, her hand touching his shoulder again with that same strange warmth. Tomorrow we begin the formal evaluation. I think you will find Zalari medical practices quite educational, As she glided from the room, Jace found himself wondering exactly what he'd gotten himself into. Jace woke to the soft chime of what he assumed was the ship's equivalent of morning. The medical bay was bathed in a warmer light now, and he felt remarkably refreshed despite the strangeness of his surroundings. He'd barely sat up when Kythera entered, carrying what appeared to be a tray of instruments that gleamed with the same bioluminescent quality as her eyes. "Good morning, Commander," she said, her voice carrying that same melodic quality that had captivated him the night before. "I trust you slept well?" "Better than I have in months," he admitted, stretching muscles that felt stronger and more flexible than they'd been since his academy days. "Whatever you did to me, it worked." "The healing is only the first step," Kythera replied, setting the tray on a nearby surface. "Today we begin the full-spectrum multisensory evaluation. This will determine whether the biotechnology has integrated properly with your human systems." She turned to face him, and Jace noticed she was wearing a different outfit today. Still, the flowing, form-fitting garments that seemed standard for her people, but these were a deeper blue that made her skin appear to glow. The fabric seemed almost alive, shifting subtly with her movements. "What exactly does this evaluation involve?" Jace asked, though something in her expression made him suspect he might not like the answer. "Complete assessment," she replied, approaching his bed with fluid grace. "Physical, neurological, emotional, and sensory integration. The Xelari biotechnology doesn't simply repair, it enhances. But these enhancements can only be properly calibrated through direct, comprehensive examination." Her luminous eyes met his steadily. "You will need to remove your garments." The clinical way she said it somehow made it feel more intimate than if she'd whispered it. Jace felt heat rise in his cheeks, a reaction that seemed to fascinate her as her eyes tracked the change in his skin color. "Is that medically necessary?" "Essential," she confirmed, moving to her instruments. "Xelari medicine requires understanding the complete biological system. Your human modesty, while interesting, cannot interfere with proper treatment." There was something in her tone, a slight emphasis on interesting, that made Jace look at her more closely. When she glanced back at him, he caught something in her expression. Not clinical detachment, but genuine curiosity mixed with something else he couldn't quite identify. Reluctantly, he pulled off the medical gown, acutely, aware of her gaze following his movements. The air in the medical bay was perfectly temperature-controlled, yet he felt his skin react as if to a cool breeze. "Fascinating," Kythera murmured, approaching with one of her instruments, a device that looked like a crystalline wand. "Human. Skin conductivity changes with emotional state. This will complicate the readings, but it provides valuable data." She began her examination at his shoulders, the crystal device glowing softly as it passed over his skin. But what surprised him was that she didn't just use the instrument. Her free hand followed behind it, fingers trailing lightly across his skin in what felt far too personal for a medical procedure. "Is the touching part of the standard protocol?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Kythera paused, her hand still resting on his chest. "Xelari are touch-sensitive beings, Commander. We process information through multiple sensory channels simultaneously. What you call touching is how we truly understand biological systems. The instruments provide data, but direct contact provides understanding." Her hand was warm against his skin, and he could swear he felt a subtle vibration, as if energy was passing between them. "Understanding of what?" "Everything," she replied simply, her fingers spreading wider across his chest. "How your heart responds to stimulus, how your nervous system processes sensation, how your body reacts to proximity." As if to demonstrate, she leaned closer, her breath warm against his neck as she examined his throat with the crystal device. Jace felt his pulse quicken, and from her slight smile he knew she'd noticed. "Your cardiovascular response is quite pronounced," she observed, though her voice had lost some of its clinical detachment. "Human physiology is remarkably reactive." "Maybe because this doesn't feel much like a medical exam," Jace said, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. Kythera stepped back slightly, tilting her head in that way that made her seem both alien and utterly captivating. "What does it feel like, Commander?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to voice. Jace found himself studying her face, noting how her bioluminescent eyes had shifted to a warmer gold, how her blue skin seemed to flush deeper along her cheekbones. "Like you're as curious about me as I am about you," he said finally. For a moment her composure cracked and he saw something vulnerable flash across her features. "The evaluation must be completed," she said, but her voice was softer now, almost uncertain. "There are protocols." "Whose protocols?" Jace asked gently. "Yours or your people's?" Kythera's hand was still on his chest, and he could feel her pulse through her fingertips, rapid, matching his own. "Both," she whispered. "But perhaps some protocols are worth questioning." The tension in the medical bay was palpable as Kythera stepped back, her professional mask slipping back into place. But Jace had seen the crack in her composure, the moment of genuine vulnerability, and it changed everything between them. "Our examination must continue," she said, though her voice lacked its earlier clinical authority. "Please, lie back on the diagnostic platform." The platform she indicated was different from the bed he'd been using, wider, with what appeared to be sensor arrays embedded in its surface. As Jace settled onto it, the material seemed to conform to his body, warm and almost alive beneath him. Kythera moved around the platform, activating controls that made the embedded sensors begin to glow. "This phase requires more comprehensive contact," she explained, her luminous eyes avoiding his gaze. "I must map your entire nervous system to ensure the biotechnology has integrated properly." "What does that involve exactly?" Instead of answering immediately, she placed both hands on his shoulders, and Jace gasped. The sensation was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, not just the warmth of her touch, but something deeper, as if he could feel her awareness connecting with his own. "Ciliary nervous systems are more extensive than human ones," she explained, her hands moving slowly down his arms. "We process emotion, memory, and physical sensation as integrated experiences. To understand how the biotechnology has affected you, I must experience your responses directly." Her touch was methodical but intimate, mapping every muscle, every nerve cluster. But as she worked, Jace began to understand what she meant about integrated experiences. Through her touch, he could sense her emotional state, her professional dedication warring with growing personal interest, her fascination with his alien physiology mixing with something much more primal. "I can feel what you're feeling," he said, wonder in his voice. Kythera's hands stilled on his chest. "That should not be possible. Humans lack the neural pathways for empathic connection. Maybe your biotechnology changed that." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with amazement and something that might have been fear. "If that's true, then the implications—" She trailed off, her hands trembling slightly against his skin. "What implications?" "Permanent bonding," she whispered. "Ciliary who achieve full empathic connection rarely separate. It becomes necessary to maintain contact." The weight of her words settled between them. "Is that what you want?" Jace asked softly. "Connection?" Instead of answering, she leaned down, pressing her forehead against his chest. Through their strange new link, he felt her conflict. Duty versus desire, curiosity versus caution, the fear of the unknown versus the pull of unprecedented attraction. "I have studied human physiology for years," she murmured against his skin. "But academic knowledge is nothing compared to this. You are warm where we are cool, solid where we are, fluid, passionate where we are controlled." Her hands moved lower, ostensibly continuing the examination. But Jace could feel through their connection that the clinical pretense was rapidly dissolving. When she touched him now, it was with wonder, with desire, with a hunger to understand, not just his body but his very essence. "Kythera," he said, his hands finding her face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. "This isn't just medical anymore, is it?" "No, she admitted, her bioluminescent eyes shifting to deep gold. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were different. Not just because you're human, but because of how you make me feel. Like I've been asleep my entire life, and am just now waking up. The examination platform's sensors were going wild, responding to their elevated heart rates, their heated skin, the electromagnetic changes that seemed to occur whenever they touched, but neither of them cared about the readings anymore. What happens now? Jace asked, his thumb tracing the elegant line of her cheekbone. Now we stop pretending this is purely medical, she said, her hands sliding up his chest to rest over his heart. Now we acknowledge what's really happening between us. And what is that exactly? Kithra's smile was radiant, transforming her alien features into something breathtakingly beautiful, something unprecedented, something that will change both our people's understanding of what's possible between species. She leaned closer, her lips hovering just above his. Something worth breaking protocol for. When she kissed him, it was nothing like kissing a human woman. Her lips were softer, her breath carried a subtle sweetness, and through their empathic connection, he experienced the kiss from her perspective as well as his own, a dizzying doubling of sensation that left them both breathless. The examination, she murmured against his lips, though her hands showed no signs of resuming clinical detachment. Can wait, Jace finished, pulling her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him despite their physiological differences. For the first time since awakening on the alien ship, Jace felt truly alive, not just healed, but transformed, connected to something larger than himself through this extraordinary woman who had risked everything to save him and was now risking even more to love him. The medical bay's soft lighting seemed to pulse in rhythm, with their heartbeats as they crossed the final line between doctor and patient, between species, between the known and the utterly unprecedented. Time seemed suspended in the medical bay as Jace and Kithra explored their unprecedented connection. Her touch had awakened something in him that went beyond physical sensation. Through their empathic link, every caress was magnified, every kiss shared from both perspectives simultaneously. I must confess something, Kithra whispered against his neck, her breath warm and sweet. The full spectrum evaluation, it was not entirely necessary. Jace's hands stilled on her back, where he'd been marveling at the subtle patterns of bioluminescence that traced along her spine. What do you mean? She pulled back to meet his gaze, her eyes shimmering with guilt and desire in equal measure. Your integration was successful from the first day. I have been extending the process. Why? Because I have never encountered anything like you, she admitted, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Your species fascinates me, but you make me feel things I did not know were possible. I wanted to understand, to explore, to what? To keep you here with me, she finished, vulnerability naked in her voice. I know it was wrong, but I could not bear the thought of you leaving before I understood what this connection between us truly meant. Jace felt her emotions through their link, the shame of her deception, the fear of his reaction, but underneath it all, a love so profound it took his breath away. Kithra, I understand if you are angry, she continued quickly. I violated medical ethics, abused my position, put my personal desires above. He silenced her with a kiss, pouring all his understanding and acceptance through their empathic connection. When they broke apart, her eyes were wide with amazement. You're not angry? How can I be angry about finding something I didn't even know I was looking for, he said, his hands framing her face. I was going through the motions of living before this, following orders, completing missions, but this, you've made me feel alive in a way I never thought possible. Tears, luminescent and beautiful, traced down her cheeks. The connection between us, it should not exist. Our species are too different, our physiologies incompatible for this level of bonding. But it does exist, Jace said, pressing his forehead to hers. And maybe that's what makes it so extraordinary. Kithara's professional demeanor finally crumbled completely as she surrendered to what had always been inevitable between them. Her touch became reverent as she explored his body, no longer pretending medical necessity but openly celebrating the differences and similarities between their species. "Your skin is so warm," she marveled, her hands mapping the contours of his chest, "and your heart beats so strongly. I can feel it through our connection like a drum calling to something deep within me." Jace was equally fascinated by her alien beauty. The way her bioluminescence intensified with arousal, how her skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, the graceful, otherworldly quality of her movements that somehow fit perfectly with his more solid human form. "Tell me about Zalari intimacy," he requested, his voice husky with desire. "I want to understand, to please you the way you're pleasing me." Her smile was radiant as she began to show him, guiding his hands to the places where her bioluminescence was strongest, teaching him how her species expressed and received affection. The empathic connection meant he could feel exactly how his touch affected her, creating a feedback loop of sensation that intensified everything between them. "This is unprecedented," she gasped as their intimacy deepened. "No Zalari has ever bonded with an alien species." The elders said it was impossible. Maybe the elders were wrong about a lot of things, Jace managed, overwhelmed by the intensity of experiencing pleasure from both human and Zalari perspectives simultaneously. Their lovemaking was unlike anything either had imagined. A perfect fusion of human passion and Zalari grace, of physical sensation and empathic connection. They moved together as if they'd been created for this moment. This perfect understanding between two beings who should have been incompatible, but instead were completing each other in ways that defied every scientific principle either species understood. The diagnostic platform beneath them pulsed with readings that would have amazed any xenobiologist: elevated bioelectric fields, synchronized neural patterns, physiological responses that shouldn't have been possible between their species, but they were lost in each other, in the wonder of connection that transcended every boundary they'd thought immutable. Afterward, as they lay entwined on the diagnostic platform, the medical bay's sensors still pulsing with readings that would have amazed any xenobiologist, Kithara traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. "What happens now?" she asked, voicing the question they'd both been avoiding. "I don't know," Jace admitted. "My mission, my people, they're expecting me back. And mine are expecting me to submit my medical report and transfer you to the diplomatic section for repatriation." They lay in comfortable silence, both understanding that they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, created something that couldn't be undone. The empathic bond between them was permanent now, as natural as breathing, and just as necessary. "We'll find a way," Jace said finally, his arms tightening around her. "This connection we have, it's too important to abandon for the sake of protocol." Kithra lifted her head to look at him, hope shining in her luminous eyes. "You would do that? Leave your old life behind? For this? For you?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Some things are worth changing everything for." The soft chime of the ship's communication system interrupted their intimate cocoon, and Kithara reluctantly pulled away from Jace's embrace. Her bioluminescence had settled into a warm, contented glow that made her look radiant in the medical bay's gentle lighting. "Nurse Kithara," came a melodic voice through the comm system. "Please report to Medical Director Theverin's office. Bring the humans' complete evaluation records." Kithara's luminous eyes met Jace's, and he felt her anxiety spike through their empathic connection. "The evaluation period has officially ended," she said quietly. "They expect my medical report. What will you tell them?" Jace asked, sitting up and reaching for his discarded medical gown. "The truth," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "That the biotechnology integration was successful beyond all expectations. That you've developed capabilities we didn't think possible in humans. That the connection between us represents a breakthrough in interspecies relations. Will they believe that last part is medical rather than personal?" Kithara's smile was rueful. "Probably not. Zalari are empathic beings. They'll sense the change in me the moment I enter the room." The question is whether they'll see it as a medical anomaly worth studying or a breach of protocol worth punishing. As they dressed, Jace found himself marveling at how natural it felt to be with her, how perfectly they moved around each other despite their completely different backgrounds. The empathic connection meant they could sense each other's thoughts and emotions, creating an intimacy that went far beyond the physical. "I have an idea," he said suddenly. "What if we frame this as exactly what it is? A breakthrough that could change everything between our peoples." "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Jace said, his excitement growing. "If humans and Zalari can form empathic bonds, if we can truly understand each other on this level, imagine what it could mean for diplomacy, for cooperation, for peace between species." Kithara's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. "You're suggesting we present ourselves as a case study?" "Exactly. Not a medical anomaly or a breach of protocol, but the first successful example of deep interspecies bonding. Something that could be replicated, studied, expanded upon." Through their connection, he felt her hope kindle, followed immediately by concern. It would mean scrutiny, testing, questions about every aspect of our relationship. "Are you willing to go through that if it means we can be together?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "But are you?" "It would mean giving up your return to human space, at least temporarily. Becoming a test subject rather than a commander." Jace pulled her close, marveling again at how perfectly she fit against him. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The walk to Medical Director Thavron's office felt like a march to judgment, but they faced it hand in hand, their empathic connection providing strength and courage to both of them. Other Zalari crew members they passed seemed to sense something different about Kithara, their bioluminescent eyes tracking her with curiosity and concern. Medical Director Thavron was an imposing figure, even by Zalari standards. Tall, with silver-streaked blue skin and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. She studied them both carefully as they entered her office, her gaze lingering on their joined hands. "Nurse Kithara," she said formally. "Your report?" "The human commander has integrated successfully with Zalari biotechnology," Kithara began, her voice steady despite the nervous energy Jace felt through their connection. "Beyond successful, actually. He has developed empathic capabilities that should be impossible for his species." "Empathic capabilities," Thavron repeated, her tone neutral. "And how did you discover this development?" "Through direct contact during the medical evaluation," Kithara replied. "We have formed what can only be described as a permanent empathic bond." Thavron's luminous eyes moved between them, reading the emotional currents that Jace was only beginning to understand. "I see. And your recommendation?" "That Commander Carter and I remain together for extended study," Kithara said boldly. "This represents the first successful deep bonding between our species. The implications for future human-Zalari relations could be extraordinary." For a long moment, Thavron was silent, her ancient eyes studying them with an intensity that made Jace feel like a specimen under a microscope. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "You believe you have discovered something new?" she said, amusement in her voice. "But you have simply rediscovered something very old. There are records dating back to the first contact between our peoples of such bonds forming. We thought the capability had been bred out of humans over the generations." Jace and Kithara exchanged surprised glances. "There are records?" Kithara asked. "Indeed. Which is why your request is approved, with conditions. You will both serve as study subjects, yes, but also as ambassadors. If such bonds can be reformed, it could indeed change everything between our peoples." Thavron stood, her formal demeanor softening slightly. "Commander Carter, are you prepared to extend your stay among us indefinitely?" "More than prepared," Jace replied without hesitation. "And Nurse Kithara, are you prepared for your career to take a very different direction?" "As long as it's with him, I'm prepared for anything," she said, squeezing Jace's hand. As they left Thavron's office with their new assignment, Jace felt a profound sense of rightness about the path they were choosing. Through their empathic Connection. He could sense Kithara's matching joy and anticipation. "Ready for a lifetime of being test subjects?" he asked with a grin. "As long as we're test subjects together," she replied, her bioluminescence flaring bright with happiness. They had found something unprecedented, not just love between species, but a connection that might help bridge the gap between worlds. And for both of them, that was worth any protocol, any career, any sacrifice. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but brilliant with possibility, their bond stronger than any force that might try to separate them. In the sterile corridors of the Zilari medical ship, two beings from different worlds had found something that transcended science, protocol, and expectation. They had found each other. As they walked back to their quarters, now shared, by official decree, Jace marveled at how a routine diplomatic mission had become the greatest adventure of his life. Through their empathic link, he felt Kithra's contentment, her excitement for their shared future, and her deep, abiding love. Some examinations, he realized, were meant to discover more than medical compatibility. Some were meant to discover the very essence of connection itself.